Good morning. My name is David Hill. I am the boys basketball coach at Lexington High School. I will be doing your devotion with you this morning. I want to thank Miss Nicole for giving me the invitation to get to do this. I really appreciate the opportunity. I want to thank her for all the work that she does throughout this area and being there for not only the athletes but the coaches. I also like to thank Scott Tarver. He's always been a great role model and been very helpful to all of us. And I just want to thank each of you for the time that you pour into us all through the school year and all throughout our daily walks. I want to be bringing to you some good news this morning. The good news, I hope you will get something that will be beneficial, that will be encouraging to you. We have a lot of bad things going on, a lot of negative times right now. We constantly see bad things. We don't really get a lot of good news. We have a terrible pandemic. We have a terrible sickness that has plagued our nation, that has plagued this world. And it can be discouraging at times. It can be frustrating. It can cause us to kind of be down. It can cause us to be pessimistic. For kids, for athletes, for coaches, for students, there's a lot of things that's been taken away that you've worked for, that you've looked forward to, and now it's gone. It could be sports. It could be your church trips. It could be church in general. It could be vacations, even just school, getting to see your friends. These are all things that have kind of been taken away. But what I want to bring is some good things and let you know about some of the things that we can control. And I really want us to kind of focus on controlling the controllables. I hope, again, this is kind of some positive things that can help you out. I'm going to be looking at Philippians chapter 4. This is one of my favorite chapters in the Bible. It oftentimes becomes popular for Philippians 4 verse 13, but there's a lot more good things that happen in Philippians 4. And this is a letter that Paul has wrote, and I want to just kind of go over it with you. In verse 4 of Philippians 4, it talks about rejoice in the Lord. He says, rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, lovely, admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know that it is what it is to be in need, and I also know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or living in want. I can do all things through Christ, through Him who gives me strength. So I want to kind of go over each of these verses with you and just kind of talk about each of them. Verse 4, it talks about that we need to rejoice. And then not only does he say you need to rejoice, but he says again, rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord. Not only rejoice, but rejoice in the Lord. Rejoice in the things that you have been blessed with so many great things that you have. Write them down. If you don't think you have a lot, try to make a list of 25 things, including water. So many different things that we are blessed with. In verse 5, it says, make gentleness evident to all. And this is something that you may not get a great opportunity to make it evident to a lot of people. But in your house, your gentleness can go a long way. Verse 6, it says, do not be anxious about anything. This is a very important one to me. I feel like to our nation, not only through this time, but all times. There's no need to be anxious. He says, kind of be anxious sometimes. No, he says, do not be anxious about anything. There's nothing you should be anxious about. But in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, pray with thankfulness. Pray and make your requests made known to God and talk to Him about it. Communicate with God, but don't be anxious about it. Trust in who He is and trust in what He does. In verse 7, it says, this leads to peace. Okay, not only does it talk about peace, but it says the peace that passes all understanding. Peace that you just don't get. Peace that we can't really fathom. And I think having this peace, it says, will guard us in Christ. And I think this is something that we really need to search for. A common thing I feel like that is so different about this time is maybe we're out of routine. Maybe we're out of our goals. But it's kind of a time to refocus and kind of get grounded back in to realizing what is most important. And I hope that you're using this time to do so. And it's something that I have tried to do and keep needing to try to do and improve my walk with God. In verse 7, it says, again, that this will guard us in Christ. In verse 8, it says, find things. So it's telling us to go search for things. But what does it say? It says, search for things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, praiseworthy. And it says to go search for them. And it says once you go find them, that you need to dwell on them. And you need to think about them. Not that you just say, well, hey, there's some good things. That's nice. No, it says to think about them. It says to fill your minds with this. Speaking of filling, I mean, we have nearly 40 more hours a week. What are we filling them with? Are we filling them with good things? Are we filling them with looking at our phone? Are we filling them with watching TV, Netflix? Are we filling them with sports? Again, all these things are great things, but we need to make sure that we fill ourselves with God. And that is what's going to lead to peace. That's what's going to lead to a life of being content. In verse 9, it says, what you've seen in Paul put into practice. I'm going to skip forward to verse 11. He says, I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. He says, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. He says, I've been living a great life. I've lived through hard times. And then basically, how does he do it? In verse 13, he says, I do it through Christ. Christ is the one who gives him strength, which is who needs to be giving us our strength now. What was his situation? His situation wasn't great at that time. His situation, you think as he's writing this, maybe he's living a great life. He is in prison. The prison is not as nice as current prisons. The prisoners were beating. The prisoners were not fed. This was not a really, quote unquote, just fun time for Paul. But he says, I've learned to be content. He has perspective. He knows who's in charge. He knows what's the most important things. And I think that's something that we all need to focus on, especially myself. As coaches, as players, as students, athletes, we need to, if we can kind of get up on this game plan, if we can get on this goal, if we can get on this routine of rejoicing, of being gentle, of not being anxious or not worrying, if we can get on the routine of praying and praying with a thankful mind and praying with a thankful heart, this is what's going to lead us to peace. And also it's going to lead us to peace by finding the good things, searching for good things, and thinking about them. Dwell on those good things and immerse yourself in the good things. These are all things I feel like are very important for us. Again, I talked about we have a lot of empty time now. We have a lot more time to maybe do some things we've not been able to do. And I think we really need to make sure that we're using some of this time to get back into realizing who our Creator is, realizing that there's been a lot of change, but there's one thing that doesn't change, and that's Jesus Christ. That's God's promises to us. And I hope that this morning, maybe this will be some thoughts that will kind of help you out. I'm going to end with Matthew chapter 6. And a lot of these things I've been talking about that we need to do, it also kind of touches on how do you use your time. In Matthew 6 and verse 19, it talks about a lot of people make treasures and make kind of deposits, but they make them here on earth. And it says the things here on earth are taken away. But then again in verse 20, it says to make your deposits to heaven, because those are eternal. Those don't go away. And then the last thing it says, that for where your treasure is, your heart is going to be also. And I hope that we can realize now more than any that we need to have our treasure being God and our relationship with Christ, because that is something that doesn't change. That is something that can't be canceled. That is something that we can have eternally and forever. And if our treasure is with God, I feel like everything is put into perspective and we can reach that peace that is so important and that is so fulfilling, that helps fulfill some of these empty holes that we have in life. I appreciate the opportunity to have a devotion with you. I hope that it was beneficial to you. I know it was beneficial for me. And these are all things that I need to work on. Thank you so much, and we will see you later.